And today's webinar is going to be all about making your data entry easier in Reach. This is something that a lot of you guys as our clients spend time on, and we want to make sure that you guys are getting the most out of that time and you're not wasting it doing little things here and there within Reach that might be taking up more time than they should. We are going to be talking about three main things today, and these are just going to be tips for you guys to really get the most out of your time when you're entering data into Reach. These might be some things that some of you already do or know of. Some of them are newer, some of them are a little older, so that's why I'm saying like you might already know about some of these tips, but some of them might be new or even a good refresher for you. So really we want to make sure we are getting quicker. So that means, being more confident in knowing how to enter our data. That's going to help us be quicker and waste less time when it comes to data entry. We want to be more efficient as well. So where we want to be quicker, we still want to make sure we're being efficient. And ultimately, we really want to make that just an easier process on all of you guys, because we know Reach can be very taxing at times and annoying and all those things that are not fun. So with that, our first tip of the day is going to be create yourself a schedule your time. And the reason I suggest this is because I've actually been talking and working with one of our clients. She's been working with me every week. We just schedule a TA session every week. And for 1 hour, she sits down and works on her Reach entries. I am usually on the Zoom call with her, so then if she has any questions, we can kind of talk it out. But during this time, she schedules it so that then she doesn't schedule any other meetings around it. She makes sure that she gets her at least 1 hour in a week for her Reach entries. So that's one of the main things that I really suggest to people, especially if you are new to Reach entry, or even if you are a seasoned veteran of Reach and you've been using it for a while, and you've just come to the point where you don't really have time to do it. My best tip is to schedule it 1 or 2 days a week even. Put it on your Google Calendar or whatever other calendar you use, and put it in there so you don't schedule a meeting during that time. It's just there for you to specifically sit down and enter your data in Reach. For me, this helps keep on track with my data entry so I'm not getting behind and forgetting things to enter. This way I'm entering my data exactly for that week and I'm good and I can move on to the next week. A lot of times we have people who get into a funk where they don't enter anything for sometimes a month, and then it's the end of the month or it's the end of a data reporting period, and you guys are trying to cram everything in all at once and trying to remember everything you did over the past month or 2 months even maybe. So that's why I really recommend getting yourself on a good schedule. At a minimum, I say once a week you should be entering stuff into Reach. It'd probably be better to try and get 2 days where you have an hour each. Just that way you don't have to spend too much time if you're only doing 1 day. If you're only doing 1 day, you might have to sit down for like 2 hours and do it, just because you'll have a little bit more data probably. So that is my first tip. Little small tip, but I just wanted to make sure that we talked about that with all of you. The next tip I want to talk about is making sure to utilize our hard copies or our templates that we have. And this is going to help you, again, stay ahead. Mainly because we know that the things that you guys are doing sometimes in the community, you might not have access to a computer to, right after when you're done doing it, to put it into Reach, right? You might be out and about in the community, traveling, doing whatever else. You don't have the ability to enter it right into Reach, so that means you might forget little tidbits or little information here or there to be able to enter that into Reach. My tip is to take some of these hard copies with you, even if it's just you print out one. You can print it out front and back, so it's just 1-pager, but use it. This way you can jot down little things, such as if you go to a meeting to talk about a new policy with the high school principal and the superintendent. Let's say that they volunteered their time for this meeting to meet with you. You can write down a quick description of what happened, select resources generated on here, and then you can also write down their volunteer hours. That way you have it on this paper, so when you do finally sit down at your laptop, your tablet, whatever it is, to do your Reach entries, you have it already on a piece of paper, and all you have to do is look at it and say, oh yeah, it was 2 hours, let's plug this in, you're good to go. For me, it's a lot easier because then you're not trying to sit there and think back and be like, okay, well, how long was this meeting? That was about a week ago now, so now you're trying to think about how long it was, what you guys actually talked about. It's a lot easier just to have these hard copies on you, because it's a nice way to even take notes on what happened at an event or a meeting or whatever you're at. You can even just take notes right on here in the description section and use that as well. I personally like this. Some people don't like it because they don't like having to use paper, which is fine too. If you're good about using a tablet or an iPad, I sometimes take notes on my iPad. Even having this template up on my iPad is really nice because I can just write in a little description and select my other options throughout. That way, when I go to do my Reach entries, I have all my templates or all of my entries in one place, and I can just pop them right in. So that is my tip there. We do have this document able to be downloaded. I will be sending it within the follow-up email to all of you guys after our webinar today. But this is what it looks like. It's really simple. We do have it in a fillable format. So if you want it as a fillable form, we can do that. The other thing that's nice about this is you can customize it to your coalition. So we know that when you get down to like the committee and work group section, these are obviously going to be different based on coalition to coalition. So these are able to be adjusted or customized if need be. Same thing with like the funding sources, we can add some there as well. So just a quick idea there, tip to use these. They're very helpful, like I said, when you're out and about and don't have that computer next to you. Our next tip, which is the one I want to spend a little bit more time on, is going to be entering multiple outputs at once. This is a relatively newer function within Reach. I want to say within maybe the past year, 2 years, we've added it. And basically, why I want to show this to you guys is because a lot of people don't realize that you can do this. And what I mean by that is we're going to walk through some examples and show you how you can enter multiple outputs at once. Therefore, it's going to reduce the amount of time you're spending having to enter your data because it's all going to be just in one of those fillable forms and you're good to go. So hopefully all these output types look familiar to you guys. These are the 5 that we're going to be talking about through our examples here. So our first example I have is going to be, I want to make sure to note this first. When you are entering multiple outputs at once, make sure your description is very clear and addresses and relates to all of the output types you select below. For example, if you were to simply say, held a meeting with so-and-so to talk about our new upcoming prescription drug take-back day. Let's say that you selected media as your output type. Nowhere in your description did you say that you distributed media to those who were there. So make sure, that's what I'm saying, make sure that you cross-reference what outputs you select with what information you're providing in your descriptions. So with that, here is our first sample description that I have. My coalition had a meeting, and let's say that it lasted 2 hours. I had 20 volunteers that attended. We had meeting space that was donated by the local library, which normally cost $100 an hour. While I was there, I, as the coordinator, also handed out a flyer to each member about the upcoming prescription take-back day that is going to be held at the local CVS pharmacy. We also discussed at the meeting how the coalition is working with the local law enforcement to get a new permanent prescription drug drop box installed. So what I now want to walk through is that when we are in Reach, if I were to type this in my description, I can then go ahead and select 4 different output types that are clearly reflected in my description here. The first one is going to be a resource generated. So I'm going to go ahead and select my resource generated and enter it as a volunteer time for my volunteer hours, right? That one's good. Next, we also have another resource generated for meeting space that was donated. So unfortunately, you cannot enter multiple resources generated at once. So this is where I'd have to copy and paste my resources here, but I still wanted to show how there is multiple things going on within one entry. The next output type we have is going to be handed out flyers. I didn't necessarily say how many I handed out, but I did say I gave one to each member. So I would go ahead and select media and put it in as 20 because there was 20 volunteers there. So I would say I handed out 20 flyers. And then the last output type here we have is a community action, because we talked about at this meeting working with the local law enforcement to get a permanent prescription drug drop box installed. So what I want to show you all now is how this looks in Reach. And let's see if it'll log me in here. So when we are in Reach, and we click on our Add New button, we have our description. So let's say that we typed in our description here. And what I mean by you can select multiple outputs at once is this section right here. So we talked about in that example how we had a resource generated, right? So I'm going to go ahead and select that. I also talked about how we had a media, so we're going to select that. And we also had a community action, so you go ahead and just select all three. And then, of course, you have to remember you have these sections down here. I handed out a flyer, so we're going to go ahead and put the 20 flyers in. And then we also had the resource type first for volunteer time, which was, we had 20 people for 2 hours, so that would be 40. Our volunteer value, you know, is $24.69, so that's our national average. Some of you might have a higher rate, which is perfectly fine. And then we have to select what it'll be used for, which is personnel. And then I go ahead and just continue on with my entry. The only thing sometimes you need to be careful about when entering multiple outputs at once is going to be the strategy, because certain outputs, depending on what you're doing, have different strategies. For instance, if we go back to the example here, the meeting itself and handing out the flyers is going to fall under the providing information strategy, right? Yes. However, when we get down to the bottom, we did talk about installing this new permanent prescription drug drop box, which means this is going to be a different strategy, which is going to be enhancing access and reducing barriers. So this is where I was saying sometimes you have to be careful about entering all of your entries at once or all of your outputs at once. Just be careful with that strategy, which is perfectly fine to go ahead and select providing information, finish filling this out, click add new, and then just come out here and edit the one that said community action, because that's the one that's going to be under community action. And you would go ahead and just select the strategy as enhancing access and reducing barriers. So that is just a quick tip there. So now I'm going to go ahead and move on to our next example. We're going to walk through a couple more of these just to show you kind of how it works and how it looks. The next example we have is that the coalition attended the Back to School Night event at Riverside High School. We attended the event that lasted 4 hours. While we were there, we had a table set up to talk about, or to talk to the 40 attendees as they kind of stopped by our booth to talk about, you know, some of our different events coming up or how to get involved with the coalition maybe, which was great. While we were at this event, we also had 2 youth members, current members, volunteer to help kind of man the booth and work at the table and talk to people. And then we also handed out 300 flyers about the coalition's upcoming prescription drug take-back day while we were there. So as you can see, we have our different colors here again. So obviously, this first one is going to be a services provided because we had our table set up for why we were there, and we had people come and talk to us. We provided information to them. So that is going to go in as a service provided. Next, we had our resource generated for our 2 youth members that volunteered for us and helped us out. And then our last one is our media for our 30 flyers that we passed out while we were there. So when you're in Reach, same thing. When you're selecting your multiple outputs, you obviously have your description in there. You're going to select that media, the resources generated in this case, and the service provided. For this event, we're going to have a preventative event. Our numbers served, we can keep it at the large 400, that's okay. If you're someone who is a little bit more accurate at tracking exactly how many people come up to your table and talk to you, and you have a better number here, that's fine as well. But we do allow you to put the overall 400 in, just in case you didn't keep track. For the length of service here, I'm going to go with an estimated 0.1, because I'm going to say that we had a couple people stop and talk to us long, but at the same time we had a lot of just short, quick interactions, so I'm going to put it at 0.1. Next we have our media, which we said was a flyer again, and we said we handed out 300 at this event, so we're going to go ahead and put that in there. And then last we have our resource type, which was our volunteer time for those 2 youth volunteers, right? And I believe we said we had 2 for 4 hours each. So we're going to go ahead and put 8 hours in here. And then our volunteer value is $24.69. And then we continue on with our entry from there. We're just going to walk through a couple more sample descriptions just to make sure you guys kind of get it. And that way we kind of walk through some descriptions that maybe you've even worked on. Our next sample description is, let's say that you guys are going to host a community picnic. Let's say 500 community members came and attended. This was the first time you guys hosted that event. It lasted 5 hours. And while you guys were there hosting this event, you guys passed out 300 calendars with upcoming coalition activities and prevention messages on it. And also for this event, we had 20 coalition members volunteer for 6 hours to kind of help set up, run, and clean up after this event. So that was great. So for this one, we have first our community change. A lot of times people sometimes miss this one and they'll just record things as a community change and forget to record all this other stuff along with it. So that's why I wanted to make sure we talked about one of these. The next thing we have in our description here is going to be a service provided. And obviously this is because we had 500 people come and attend our event and we were hosting this event. So we can claim the full 5 hours as our length of service here as well. Next we have our media, which was our 300 calendars that we passed out. And lastly, we have our resources generated again for our volunteer time. So this is a really important one that I wanted to walk through because, like I said, a lot of people don't realize sometimes when they have community changes that they also have all these other things within it that could be recorded as outputs as well. And that's a lot of times where people get tripped up in Reach 2 when they might not know how to enter things. They'll just put it in as one thing when it actually could be, like in this case, 4 different outputs. So just make sure that you're taking that step back and looking at your entire event that you're recording, because it could be more than one output. So for this one, we're going to go ahead and just do this. We had our community change, which adds nothing extra, so we're good there. We had our media, which I do believe we said it was 300. We have 300 calendars there. So I would go ahead and put this as media type under other. Just remember, when you're using the other category, make sure to be specific in your description about what that media was. And since we said it was calendars, that's pretty good there. So we're going to go ahead and type in 300 here. We have then our resources generated for our volunteer time. So again, we have volunteer type. We had 20 people for 6 hours, I believe we said. Let me double check. Yep, 20 coalition members for 6 hours. So that is a lot of volunteer time. So we want to make sure we get that. So we have that. And then for the value, again, our $24.69, unless you are higher in your state. What will it be used for? Personnel. And then lastly, we have our service provided. And our service provided, like we said, was our 500 community members for the 5-hour event. So we want to go ahead and select our length or our type of service to be preventative, since they're just kind of coming there to enjoy themselves and maybe get some information from you guys like the calendars or other things. The number served was our 500 people. And our length of service was the 5-hour-long event. And then we continue on from there. Again, make sure to double check your strategy when you are selecting things, since like Dave was saying, at this point we cannot select more than one. So just be sure once you go ahead and click add new, if you need to go back and change a strategy for one of the outputs and not the other, make sure you do go back and do that out here once you've added your entries. So with that, we're going to go ahead and go to our last sample description. And this is going to be an alcohol youth summit. This is, again, our first time holding this alcohol youth summit in Riverside. So it is going to be a community change. We had 100 students attend the 5-hour youth summit event that we held at the local YMCA. So we want to make sure we got our service provided there. The YMCA did donate space to hold the youth summit, so we want to make sure we get our resource generated for in-kind for the space, and make sure we get that. So in the going rate for the space is $200 an hour, so we want to make sure that we times that by 6 hours to get our accurate in-kind amount. And then our last one, again, is we had 15 volunteers volunteer for 6 hours to help organize and run the event. So again, kind of the same thing with our volunteer hours there. I'm not going to walk through this one in REACH because it's pretty similar to a lot of the other ones we talked about, but I wanted to walk through a different one-off. This one's more alcohol-driven example, just to show you guys what it looks like. With that, thank you all for joining us today, and I hope you guys all have a great rest of your day and a great week. Thank you.